All right, so today we're going to talk about team building and trust activities. They're definitely key in leadership and in building a team. Most often leaders are working with other people, and so it's important to be part of that team, but also to be out in front of that team when necessary. So today we're going to talk about some tips and tricks to get through team builders and trust activities. They're two different activities, but we're going to talk about how to get through them and make them useful in your training and in your role as a leader. All right, so here's kind of where we're going. Basically, it's about, is your team struggling to be cohesive? Are you wondering how to form a solid foundation for your team currently? And are you looking for exercises to form unity? So if you're looking for all those things, this is the place to be, and hopefully that's what you'll get out of this session. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about an introduction. I'm going to ask you guys to respond about what you want from the session. Then we're going to talk about where I see us going, the team builders, trust activities, how to use them, and then some resources and tips for you as leaders. So to start, basically, the question is, what do you want to gain out of this? Hopefully it's those things that we just talked about. But also, I hope that you understand the point is that you're just going to take away some tips and some tricks. Here's what I hope that you guys gain. Some basic knowledge about team builders and trust exercises. I hope that you also understand how to set achievable goals related to those activities, and then to gain knowledge on facilitating a group, because it's a little different than a one-on-one conversation. So why is this important and why do we do it? There's a ton of reasons. They're listed up here. I'm not going to read them to you. A lot of it comes down to knowing each other on the team and knowing how you and others interact when the team is together. Here's a whole nother list of reasons as to why we do team builders and trust activities. And in these situations, they're usually a little high stress or have a little more pressure. And because they do, we get to see kind of who people really are. And it gives us a good example as to where people might react when it's time to perform as a group. So a team builder. The goal is a non-threatening activity that allows the group to have fun and get to know one another. There are a ton of examples of these. I'm not going to list any of them here because you can just do a simple Google search and find a ton. Some require 45 minutes to an hour, some require 5 minutes. Some require extensive setup and materials, others you just do by talking. So there's all kinds of range, and the goal is to make people feel comfortable knowing who's around them and interacting with those who are around them. There are 3 levels of team building, which is really important. The first is basic, so simple. You should do these early on when the group is forming or norming, even when they're creating who they're going to be. So this is one that's going to talk about who you are and where you're from and those kinds of things. There's an intermediate level, which these happen, somewhere in the middle. This is where some stuff has already been disclosed. Some people are comfortable with one another, but usually these are a little more physical and keep up an active pace. And then the last one is advanced. So these are groups that are pretty solid, they know each other really well, and they're ready to move to a place where they can talk about being together, and they're really comfortable to share what the team builder might ask of them. Here are some tips when you're facilitating a team builder. Never say just find a partner. That's going to lead to usually people who are already friends, becoming each other's partner, or you're going to just kind of have some chaos. It's a lot better if, as a facilitator, you say things like, find somebody who has the same birth month as you, or hold up a number between 1 and 5, and then find everybody with the same number. It's a great way to build teams within a team and to alleviate the chaos that can happen from just finding a partner. Make sure you mix the team builders up. Do some physical ones like trust walks or trust falls or stuff that requires people to be up and active, but also do ones where people have to sit down and think and have to actually work through something as the team. Both are 2 different dynamics that are really important. And we do that because not everybody has the same strength. So you might see a leader step up in the physical one because in nature it is a physical activity, and so it requires a certain set of skills, versus one where it's more puzzle oriented. You might see some other people step up. So make sure you're speaking to everyone's strengths when you're building the team. The most important part of a team builder always, in our office we talk a lot about getting into it, so the lead in, going through it, and then pulling out of it. And so that out of piece is what's really important, and that's what people are going to take with them. So people don't always learn from experience, they mostly learn from reflecting on that experience. So part of a team builder is to make sure that you have the experience, but then you facilitate that discussion afterwards. So make sure you relate things to the real world. You can discover useful insights in debriefing. Make sure that you're giving people an opportunity to think within themselves, but then also to share with the larger group. Basically, a good model to follow with a debriefing session is to first start with a simple question like, what did you think of the activity, or how did you feel about the activity? Maybe point out some certain things that happened and how they felt about those. Ask if they learned, and then you want to relate it to whatever your ultimate goal is. In this example, it's the real world, but it might be, how does this apply to us coming together next semester, or how does this apply to us leading an organization? So make sure that you make that relation. It's really great to throw in some what ifs. So how would it have been different if X happened? And then you obviously want to talk about what's next, either in your agenda that day or how you're going to continue to use that team builder. So an important question that leads into trust activities is simply, what is trust? There is no clear definition, but there are some certain aspects to trust that are really important, and we're going to talk about those in relation to trust builders or trust activities. A guideline that we always use in new student programs that I would really recommend you taking back to your own organization is ROPES. The first is respect. Everything we said, all of our actions are going to show that we respect one another. There's going to be always an openness to the fact that everyone is here to get better and to do something in a better way or to succeed more. So that openness, and part of that openness is the fact that oops and ouches are going to happen. There's going to be times where somebody says something and it's, oops, I didn't mean that. Or, ooh, ouch, that looks like it really affected you in a negative way. So part of that openness is knowing that there's going to be unintentional oops and ouches along the way. Participation is key. We're here as a team. It's important that the entire team buys in and participates. Everyone knows the goal is to educate, so you want to make sure that you're clear in that when you're facilitating a team builder or a trust activity. And the last part is sensitivity and safety. The point is that we're open and we're respecting that oops and ouches might happen because everyone is being sensitive about what they're saying, and they're getting to a place where their goal is to not offend someone. So everyone is already being sensitive and safe about what they're saying and how they're saying it, and making sure that they're making good decisions. But we also know that we're going to respect the fact that sometimes oops or ouches happen. So this is a great model. It's really easy to remember, and it really gets people involved. This is also something that you want to very clearly state before a trust activity. So a lot of times we talk about, like in our office, the treehouse of trust. So everything within the room, everything that's said, that's where it's going to stay. And we do all of this under the model of ropes, and the fact that people can share whatever they want to and whatever they're comfortable with, because this is a safe place to do those kinds of things. This is also something that you want to explicitly state before you start, and not just kind of glide over, but you want to make sure everyone buys in and understands ropes. So after you've done your activity, whatever it is, again, a simple Google search, or my office has a library of resources. The library has a ton of resources about trust activities. Make sure you leave time for wrap-up. This is key. Again, people don't always just learn from the experience. They have to learn from talking about it and reflecting. So some sample questions about trust. What was most difficult? What surprised you? What did you learn? Etc. So, and sometimes you have to ask that what did you learn question multiple times, because somebody might not realize what they're taking away with it until you get 15 or 20 minutes into a debriefing session. You also, we really encourage a time for people to take a minute and think what are their final comments about the situation, and that's a time then when we call on everyone and really encourage them to participate. So Final comments is really important also when you're debriefing. So trust activities, they're great, but it's not something that can be taught. You have to put people in a situation where they can begin to trust one another and understand the importance in that trust, and then it's going to happen. It's not something that you can just tell people to do and then happen. So it cannot be taught, but it can develop over time, and that's the point of the activity, is to facilitate a place for that to happen. So to kind of start to close, I'm going to talk about some helpful hints for you as leaders. Make sure that you're using humor and you're excited about the topic. Make sure that it's personal and you let the group know about yourself as you get started, but also about one another. Allow for spontaneity. Some of the best lessons that come out of team builders and trust activities come from a spontaneous burst of emotion, or somebody doing something that's really comical, that lightens the mood, that makes it drive home the point of the activity. Call students by names and be inclusive. So it's important for you. It's important for you to know the group that you're participating, or that is participating. Be considerate of weather conditions. Don't plan on doing something outside and not have a contingency plan, so make sure you're looking forward to that kind of stuff. Change team builders up. These things go through cycles, and so the same leaders might have seen the same thing, so make sure you're ready to do a little bit of a twist or to make it better. Practice anything you're unfamiliar with, and don't ever force somebody to participate. Now, that's different than someone just being like reluctant and thinking something isn't cool. And then there's somebody who you can physically and visually tell they're not ready to participate for whatever reason. Let them have that moment, because it's important that they understand above all else that you trust them as their leader, and that they can trust in the fact that you are looking out for what's best for them. Another page of helpful hints here. Ask group for help if you need it. Don't be afraid to ask your colleagues about what's the best way to make the trust build, or the team activity, or the trust builder to happen. Allow time for the activity and for the debriefing. Also, make sure it's something that is conquerable. It's something that people can get right. It's a puzzle they can complete. One of the worst things you can do in a team builder or trust activity is get them to that point of conflict and working hard, and then you don't have time for them to complete it. That's most often going to not successfully build the team or trust. Take suggestions from others. Don't be afraid to facilitate something as a practice in front of someone so that you can get good feedback. Try to make the time uninterrupted without discussions. So, we talked about weather conditions earlier and being outside. You don't want to go outside in the middle of marching band practice and try to have the team be yelling over marching band practicing. So make sure you're ready for stuff like that. Obviously, preparation and organization matters. I keep hitting that button, I'm sorry. Be positive and give constructive feedback. Again, the point is to build up, not tear down. And the point is never to tear down to build up. We're always building up and moving forward. Make sure the exercise is relevant for your specific group. You don't want to do something that is too low of a level or too high of a level, because it's going to put them in a place where if it's too low of a level, they think it's mundane and they're not going to take anything out of it. And if it's too challenging, like I said before, if they don't complete the task, they're not going to enjoy it and they're not going to take anything out of it that way either. And encourage everyone to participate. So I said before, don't be afraid to pull in that person who's a little reluctant, but also be aware of people who are at a place where they're not ready to participate, but do everything you can to facilitate and encourage participation across the board. Here's some great resources for you. This is probably where you found this presentation, is on the iLead stuff. The National Clearinghouse for Leadership Programs has a ton of team builders and trust activities. Again, you can find anything from a short period to a long period of time with no setup to a ton of setup. So whatever works for you. The Center for Creative Leadership also has a ton of those same resources. I think there's actually even a website that's like residentassistant.com, which has a ton of team builders and trust activities. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And like I said, my name is Matthew. I'm a program coordinator in new student programs.